In this video, we are going to continue factoring where the leading coefficient, the number in the front, is greater than 1, and we have a trinomial. So remember in the previous video, I showed you two different ways to factor this trinomial. Okay, so I'm going to show you both ways to review that. So one way, actually, you always have to see if there's a GCF. So the first step is always, is there a GCF? No matter which way you're going to do it, that is still the first step. Look to see if there's a GCF greater than 1. So something that divides into 2, 7, and 15, and the answer is no, so we skip it. So that's the same for either method. Okay. Then the second step is also the same. You're going to take this number here, and you're going to take the last number here. You're going to take, this is called A, this is called B, and this is called C. You're going to multiply 2 times negative 15, and you get negative 30. So you have to find what multiplies to negative 30, and it has to add to 7. So again, this is the same step that you would be using if you want to do it by grouping. So I would recommend you pausing the video and finding those two numbers so that I don't go too fast for you. So 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10, and 5 times 6. So it has to add to a positive 7, so the bigger number is positive. So these numbers here are positive. Has to multiply to a negative, so I know that one of them has to be negative. Now I have to find which ones would add to 7. So if I pick negative 3 and 10, negative 3 times 10 would multiply to negative 30, and they would add to 7. So that's how I know what to pick. So then if we're going to use this method, we take the 2x and we put it here and we put it here. And then you take these two numbers and put them in the spot here and here. And it doesn't matter which one goes which. And then we ask ourselves, can anything divide into 2 and 3 other than 1? No. Can anything go into 2 and 10? Yes, 2. So then we'd have x plus 5 here. Now, if we want to make sure we didn't make a little mistake, we should be multiplying 2 times 1 and make sure you get this number here. And then a negative 3 times a positive 5 and make sure you get this number here. So if you do, it doesn't mean you're right. It means good. You're on the right track. If you want to make sure you're 100% right, you got to multiply this whole thing and FOIL it. Okay, so we see what the answer is. Now I'm going to do it again with grouping. So grouping is the same steps here, except for with grouping, you're going to take this one out, get rid of it, and replace it with negative 3x plus 10x. So 7x is the same thing as negative 3x plus 10x. So in other words, the other method is to change the problem to have 4 terms. 1, 2, 3, 4. Whereas this method, you keep the 3 terms. So then what you do after you have 4 terms is you're going to group the first 2 and the last 2 and look for a GCF. So what do they have in common here? X. So x times 2x is 2x squared, and x times negative 3 is negative 3x. Now I'm going to go here, and these both have 5 in common. So 5 times 2x is 10x, and 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. Now if I did this right, when I move my hand over here, these should match, and they do. So then I'm going to put these two together, and I'm going to bring one of these down, so I'm essentially factoring out that GCF of 2x minus 3. And as you can see, that's the same answer that we got here using this other method. The only difference is the x plus 5 is first, x plus 5 here is second. It doesn't matter. These are the same answers. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the next problem. So we have 6x cubed minus 9x squared minus 6x. I'm going to rewrite it so I have more room here. So the very first step is to look for a GCF. So that's always step 1. Well, I know that x is in common. They all have x's. And I know that 3 can go into all of these. So that's how I know the GCF is 3x. That's how I know what goes in the front. So then 3x times 2x squared would make this. And then 3x times negative 3x would make negative 9x squared. And then 3x times negative 2, we get negative 6x. So right there, that is step 1. You always have to do that, no matter what. Now this 3x just gets brought down, but ignore it so it doesn't confuse you. And now we're going to multiply a and c, so 2 times negative 2. So it has to multiply to negative 4, and the numbers have to add to negative 3. So go ahead and pause the video and figure out what numbers would work. So it has to add to a negative, so I know the bigger number is the negative 1. But it has to multiply to a negative, so 1 has to be positive and 1 has to be negative. And they have to add negative 3, so 1 plus negative 4, 1 plus negative 4 adds to negative 3, and they multiply to negative 4. So that's how I know to use those two numbers. So then I'm going to take 2x and 2x. So I'm going to take this and put it here and here. And then I'm going to fill in the holes right here with the 1, positive 1, and negative 4. And then the very last step is there a number that goes into both of these? No, so I bring it down. Is there a number that goes into both of these? And hopefully you're thinking 2. And then if I want to make sure I feel good about my answer, this does not take too long, and it's so important. You take the 3 and multiply it with the 2, and then you multiply it with, there is no number here, so 1. And make sure you get this number that you started with there. Then you're going to take the 3 and multiply it by the last number in the parenthesis. And make sure you get this number here. If you do, that doesn't mean you're right. It means you should feel good about your answer. If you want to make sure you're 100% correct, you have to multiply all of this out, FOIL it. That takes a little longer than that quick check. Okay. All right, so if we look at this next one here, so the first thing is GCF. We skip. Nothing divides all of them. Step 2, we're going to multiply a and c, so 3 times negative 2. So it has to multiply to negative 6, and it has to add, so if there's no number here, it's a 1, has to add to 1. So feel free to pause the video and find those numbers. So because it has to add to a positive, I know the bigger number is positive. So that's how I know the 6 and the 3 are positive, and so that means the smaller of the two numbers has to be negative. And then when I add negative 2 and 3, it makes positive 1. And when you multiply them, it makes negative 6. So that's how I know to use this. So then I'm going to take this 3x and I'm going to put it in the front of the parentheses. And then I'm going to stick the -2 and the 3 in the second spot of the parentheses. And then ask myself, does anything divide 3 and 2 other than 1? No, so it stays the same. But here, 3 goes into both of these. So 3 divided by 3 is just 1x, and 3 divided by 3 is just 1. And again, if I want to make sure that I am correct, I need to check these two, multiply them together, and make sure I get this. And then multiply these two together, and make sure I get this one. So again, a good way to do a quick check to make sure you're on the right track. And I'm going to show one more just to make sure it's clear. The other way that you could do this problem is by changing it into 4 terms. So you're going to, once you find these two numbers, you're going to take out the middle term and replace it with your -2 and 3. It doesn't matter which one. I want to put the 3 first and the -2x. So 3x minus 2x is 1x. And then I can do this by grouping. So what do these both have in common? A 3 and an x. And then 3x times x would make 3x squared. And 3x times 1 is 3x. Now over here, they both have -2 in common. So -2 times x is -2x. And -2 times +1 is -2. Now, if I did this correct, these should match. And they do. So then I'm going to put these two together and bring down an x plus 1. So again, we get the same answer here, just 2 different ways to do it. This is by grouping. You're changing 3 terms into 4 terms and grouping. Whereas this is using the AC method, and we're not changing it into 4 terms. All right, let's take a look at this problem over here. So the first thing I see is they have a GCF. They all have x's, and I take the one that's smaller, so x squared. And then 2 goes into all of these, so my GCF is 2x squared. So 2 times 5 is 10, and I already have 2. I need 2 more to make 4. And then 2 times 11, x, would make 22x cubed. And then 2 times 6, when I distribute, is 12, and then I already have the x squared. So that was step 1. Now this 2x squared is not going anywhere. If this is my final answer, I can't forget about it. I need it or my answer won't be right. So then I'm going to multiply a and c. So remember, this is a, b, and c. So I'm going to multiply a and c. And I have to find out what's going to multiply to 30, but it has to add to 11. So feel free to pause the video to figure out what numbers would work. So because it has to add to a positive, I know the bigger number is positive. So I know these are all positive, but it has to multiply to a positive, so these have to be positives. So I have to find which ones would add to 11, and that's how I know to pick those two. So then I'm going to do 5x, I'm going to take this, put it here and here. And then I'm going to take the 5, so this 5, and this 6, and it doesn't matter which one goes which. I'm going to put the 5 and the 6 in. Now this 2x squared just gets brought down, right? Gets brought down every step of the way. And then the very last step is to see if there's a number that goes into both of these. And in this case, 5 goes into 5, so it would be x plus 1 here, and then nothing but 1 goes into 5 and 6, so it stays the same. And now I have my answer. But if I wanted to do a quick little check just to make sure this makes sense, this answer, I'm going to take the GCF, which is 2, multiply it by this number here, which is 1, and multiply it by the 5. So I'm multiplying the first two numbers with the GCF. And when I do that, I should get what I started with, the 10. Then I'm going to do the 2 again with the 1 and the 6. So times the 1 times the 6. And I should get this number right here. So again, this doesn't mean you're right. It just means you're on the right track. Alrighty, let's try the next one here. So first of all, these are all even numbers, so definitely 2 is our GCF here. They all don't have x's, so just 2. So 2 times x squared, 2 times 42x, so 2 times 42 is 84x, 2 times 80. Okay, so that was step 1. Step 2, so if we look here, after we do this step here, now there's not a number here. See how all of these had a number in the front, a number in the front? Well, after I do the GCF, there is no number here. So when I multiply A and C, I just get 80. So 1 times 80 is 80. So I have to find what multiplies to 80. And it has to add to 42. So go ahead and pause the video and think about it. Okay, now I know that it has to add to a positive, so I know these are positive numbers. It has to multiply to positive, so both have to be positive. So it has to add to 42, and that's how I know to pick 2 and 40. Now, because this is a 1, because this is a 1 here, that's why it didn't matter what number this was, you still just get this 80 here. Now this 2 just gets brought down, and we would have x plus 2. So whatever this is goes here and here, and then you're going to put the 2 and the 40 in. And then see if anything can divide both of these numbers. And there's nothing, so this would be the final answer. Now if I quickly want to check this, I'm going to take this 2, multiply it by this 1 right here, multiply it by this 1 here, and make sure I get this number here that I started with. Then I'm going to take the GCF, multiply it by this 2, multiply it by this 4, and make sure, oh, whoops, it wasn't a 4, 2 times 40, and make sure we get this number here, which we do. So again, that doesn't mean we're right. It just means it feels good. All right, last one here. So first of all, we have to see if there's a number that divides all of them. So no. So then we would multiply A and C. So 24 times 9 is 216. So we have to find out what numbers multiply to 216 and add to this negative 35. So feel free to pause the video and think about what numbers multiply to 216 and add a negative 35. So I'm going to model I don't know. So we know 1 times 216. It's even, so 2. 2 times 108. If I add 2 plus 1 plus 6, I'd get 9, and 3 goes into 9. So therefore, I know that 3 can go into 216. Do you see how I figure this out quickly by using those divisibility rules that we've talked about before in this class? Okay, 4 can go into a number that ends, the last 2 digits, 4 can go into 16. So that's how I know to pick 4. So 216 divided by 4. I shouldn't pick 5. It doesn't end in a 0 and a 5. 6, yep, I should pick 6 because when 2 and 3 are on the list, I know 6 goes into 216. 7, I'd have to check. There's no trick for that. Doesn't work. 8, yep, 8 times 27. And I have a lot of numbers there. So let's see if any of those work before I see if there's other ones. So it has to multiply to a negative. So I know the bigger number is negative. So I know this is negative, negative, negative. All these are negative because it's bigger than the other number. And it has to multiply to a positive. So that's how I know that they're both negatives, because a negative times negative is a positive. So I have to find out which ones are going to add to make negative 35. So if I check these ones, negative 8 plus negative 27 makes negative 35. And then when we multiply them, it makes 216. So that's how I know to pick these two numbers. So then we're going to take this 24x and put it here and put it here. Now again, this is so wrong because 24 times 24, when you FOIL this, we don't get this. But it's okay. We'll take care of it in a moment, that mistake. We're going to now fill in the spots with the negative 8 and the negative 27. And then lastly, you ask yourself, what can divide into both of these two numbers? And 8. So you'd have 3x minus 1 here. And then what can go into both of these is 3. So we'd have 8x minus 9 here. Now, why does that work? Well, if you multiply 8 times 3, you get that extra, because I put the 24 in both spots and we only needed 24. So I put 24 times too much into this problem, and by dividing out the 8 and the 3, it took care of that, undoing that extra multiple of 24 that I put into the problem. Now, when I'm all done, when I box this and say I'm done, I want to just do a quick check. I take the first two numbers, so the 3 and the 8, make sure I get this number here, and then take the last two numbers, make sure we get that number.